Reason number 11 that your next boat should be a Camus. Our flat back step. Look at the back of most bass boats on the market, and you'll see a rounded, slippery surface that makes that part of the boat dysfunctional. Look at that. You can't step there. Located on both sides of your Camus, these functional back steps allow safe entry and exiting of your Camus boat. The next time nature calls, you'll be glad you're in a Camus. Build your next boat at camusboats.com. BTL's Matt Pangrac is with us today. This is the Oh God, It's a Forward Facing Sonar portion of the show segment. But each of the major tours this year reacted to the drama of Forward Facing Sonar with various changes. I'd like to hear your thoughts about each of them. We can start with any of the ones you want. BPT, if you'd like. I really was interested in your interview with the young guy.
Drew Gill.
Who talked about it's just going to make it even worse for the guys that don't.
Drew Gill.
What's that?
Drew Gill.
Oh yeah, Drew. Yeah, I was really interested in Drew's interview. I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Be careful what you wish for. But yeah, let's hear what you think about each of the tours.
I think it's really interesting, and what I think is interesting is this is, this has been around since 2017, and it really just came to a head last year. And both the FLW originally and then MLF and Bass had 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023 to do something about it. And they didn't. And it wasn't until really, I would say 2023 that it became a major issue. I think it's interesting how each of the organizations has approached it, with the MPFO with none, with a real hybrid theory over on the BPT, and then with allowing one transducer on Bass. My personal view on it is you had 8 years to do something about it, and you didn't, and you cultivated a generation of anglers that are now using it, integrating it into their daily routine. These guys have been using it since they were 14, 15, 16 years old. Every angler has had the exact same opportunity to learn the intricacies of it, to fish it, to build it into their style of fishing, whether that's a power, whether that's finesse, whether that's shallow perspective, offshore, stumps. And it doesn't seem fair to me to take it away after you have anglers that have made the top level utilizing it. To me, it would be like taking the 3-point line away from Steph Curry.
Thank you. This, to me, this wasn't a problem until Randy Blockett's YouTube channel came along. I just don't think it was. Well, I think what it comes down to is that there's a lot of old guys that don't like getting beat by young guys. And I would say you mentioned Jacob Wheeler earlier. Jacob Wheeler is a great example. He is not a young guy. He was a young guy, but he is not a young guy.
Tour veteran.
He is a veteran, and he has embraced this. And it's, to me, when you make this argument, you're admitting that you can't compete. You're just flat out admitting that you can't compete. Which is why when I look at what the NPFL did, I'm like, guys, really? Why don't we just call it the senior tour?
So I understand, like, if there is a market for that, if there are enough anglers that want to do that, I have no issue with that. Where I, and I'll say this, and I like Brad. I like the MPFL. I support them. I say they're like a cat. They have 9 lives over there. They have every reason to not exist right now, and they keep coming back because they make good decisions, because they take care of their anglers, because there's a core base of guys that really enjoy fishing that. But to me, it makes no sense in some of the things that they've come out with in press releases and statements out there to talk about the reliance on technology and allow 360, but not allow the forward-facing sonar. If you want to go old school, but like, where do you draw, like, where is that arbitrary line? Where is it objective and where is it subjective? So where is it to say, if you look back at, and go back to the Toyota Texas Bass Classic and go back to a number of years there, like Keith Combs was very dominant. One of the reasons that he was because he was a very early adopter of the 360, and he'd take that chartreuse powder blueback and he'd take that big worm and he'd put it in brush piles that other guys weren't looking at, and he'd sit in that shallow water. He'd say, "Oh, there's piles over there." I mean, the guy won $750,000 because of technology, and also because Keith Combs, one of the best crankers in the world, but he utilized that. So like to say 360 is okay, but the live stuff isn't, like, I think if you're going to do that, you go all or nothing. So like, where do you draw the line on that is what I'm saying. I like the fact that there are 3 different organizations that are doing 3 different things. I think we're going to have to wait and see how it all pans out. But I hope, Keith, I hope that this isn't a case of the squeaky wheel gets the grease, because if you look at the organizations, there's been some one-off, like no forward-facing stuff. They did not have good participation numbers. You look at what happened with the invitationals, where they did one day with, one day without. There are a lot of guys that would be fishing the invitational here in a couple weeks that fish the open on Rayburn. There are guys who made the BPT because they didn't want to go back to the one day with, one day without. I think if you were to pull the majority of high level tournament anglers across all the board, I'm not just talking about the top guys, I'm not talking about the guys who have made millions of dollars without it. They don't want to go back to fishing without it, because those organizations made that decision for those 7 years that they didn't do anything about it, that it is now part of their fishing arsenal, is now part of their repertoire, and the Pandora's box is opened. And to go back without it, I think would be an injustice to an entire generation of anglers, which is one of the reasons why there's so much new young blood in the sport right now.
Yeah, this is what we always talk about. How are we going to get new anglers to come into the sport? Well, I think the technology is something that youth is familiar with, and bring them in. I've been a key donator in each of the last couple of U.S. Opens out here in the West, and I've gotten my lunch fed to me by guys that are good at this. So I'm going to get better at this. I don't know that I will ever win the U.S. Open, but I'm going to get better at this. I'm determined to get better at it. We mentioned crappie fishing. I had this crappie trip in Maryland recently, and it was phenomenal. It was incredible just to see how fish reacted to the baits and things like that. So I don't know. I think that technology increases are good for the sport, and I think they should let you have your power breaks too, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, I think that was a squeaky wheel gets the most grease situation, where you had a couple guys that were very vocal about it, that had sponsorship with trolling motor companies that did not want, that would not allow them contractually to put them on.
Yeah.
So they made a big, but like at the same time, Keith, like, I just, like I said, just competed on Sam Rayburn, and I had 6 spinning rods in the boat and 1 jerkbait on 10-pound test. And there's still a part of me that was saying, man, we're pre-spawn on Sam Rayburn with so much history, so much tradition. And I made 5 casts with a jerkbait, 1 cast with a drop shot. And for 3 days of practice and 1 tournament day, every other cast was made with a jig head minnow. And I would say 60 to 70% of the field could say the same thing. So there is, and maybe this is because I'm older now, right? I've been in it forever. Like, I mean, I didn't grow up with that. Like, I did it. Like, I fished Rayburn, where it's, make sure you got your red traps, and even though you hate throwing a Carolina rig, you want to be dragging that thing, trying to find the hard spot on it, and the chatterbait. But part of me was like, man, I don't know. There was a part of me that's like, is this good for the sport, that you're on a fishery like this, and there is one thing that and then you look at the top 10, every single, or 9 of the top 10 had the exact same, like the exact same baits, like minor jig head changes, but like 7 of them had a mooch minnow on, and then the guys that didn't have a bait on, that was a Sakamata shad. And I'm like, is that good? I don't know. Like, I said that in the last segment, but I understand some of the issues that can arise with mass standardization, because it is so effective. I don't know what the right answer to that is. I really don't. It would be very interesting to see how things play out over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, but I agree, and I don't want to keep beating a dead horse in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize that just about every time I do a podcast, there's got to be a forward facing sonar segment. But as you said, for so many years, nobody said a word about this, and now all of a sudden it's a problem. It's a problem because people that don't adapt um, don't like getting beat by people that have adapted it. So
Yeah, I would agree with that. And yeah, I mean, it's a powerful tool, but so is side imaging. Dude, I remember being out on Toledo Bend with Harold Allen. We were covering an Elite Series tournament, and Harold was dog cussing 1-foot contours and navionics chips and GPS mapping. And we went above the bridge, and there were a couple guys that were out in the forest, and he's like, the only reason those guys are out there is because they could look at their map and they could see that there's a high spot. And then they just have to hit a button and they can go directly back to that high spot. And he goes, you see that tree and you see that roof and you see that. He goes, I fished that spot since 1970 and I never saw anyone on it because I knew how to triangulate and I knew how to drive a boat. He goes, these guys don't know how to triangulate. They don't know how to drive a boat. They look at their map, they drop a waypoint, and they can go right back to it. That's 8 systems removed from where we are now. Like, where do you stop? And I mean, he had a valid point there, right? Like, I mean, that's how I also did an interview with a guy named Rooster on Lake Gunnersville, who used to be like right when after they filled Lake Gunnersville, he found all the shell beds by dragging a window weight on a rope. And he could tell based on the feeling of the rope whether it was a hard bottom or not. He was one of the original guys who fished offshore there. Like how do you stymie growth without everybody ending up doing the same? I don't know. It's the same thing you're dealing with social media. It's the same thing you're dealing with in the world right now. It's an interesting question, Keith. It really is.
And I recognize it's probably one that doesn't have an answer.
Doesn't have an answer.
Absolutely. I'm Keith Neiswanger. This is the Bass to Anglers podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe. If you'd like to reach us, please send us a direct message on Instagram at Bass Tour Anglers Podcast. Take care. Be safe. We'll talk to you next time.